Бюджет России.
Russian budget is seriously storming. Business is on the verge of mass bankruptcies and non-payment crisis, and all those who are talking about it are threatened the risk of being taken by Siloviki, by the Putin's power agencies, from their economic forums. So today's video will be dedicated to the crisis situation in Russian economy and things that were brought to light and the conflicts between the top level of Putin bureaucrats on the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that just finished. And this is the main economic vitrine of Putinism, of his rule. We thought this is all that they can say about it, but during the last day of this forum, they actually opened the floodgates. I think they said so much that they could have earned several criminal prosecution efforts by Putin's authorities based on what they were talking about. And this forum was so rich that we just couldn't skip that day. We could not talk about it. You gotta see that. And the level of amazement was very well summed by Ksenia Sobchak, who was in one of these sessions, who took the mic to say that she feels that she ended up being at another nude party, comparing Petersburg Economic Forum with the socialites and singers nude party that caused an outrage in the media. I'm basically one step away from the nude party the way I feel after listening to all your speeches, fellows, here. And that was a snippet from the breakfast at that forum. And this was her reaction to the speech of Makarov, who is the head of Duma Committee on Budget and Taxes. Our regular viewers already know him. He is a well-known figure who is allowed from pretty high tribunes to describe rather honestly the difficult and terrible situation in Russian economy. We'll get back to him in a minute. Now, talking about the forum at large, this is probably the most impressive St. Petersburg forum of all that I've seen. And this indeed is something that is symbolizing the sunset of an empire, literally. On one hand, nobody really came to visit Putin on this forum. We remember earlier ones were visited by some key figures like Xi Jinping and the like. Today, China sent not even the representative of Xi, but some vice prime somebody for this forum. You can look at the lists of the guests. It was also attended by the advisor to Bahrain Emir and a visitor from South African Republic. Among the bigger figures, there was maybe a president of Indonesia. This is not nothing, but one can tell that top leadership of China, for example, completely ignored this one. Because why spend money on your colony, essentially? That's what Putin turned Russia into. Putin himself is demonstrating complete detachment from reality. He was talking again about Russia being economy number 4 in the world and first economy in Europe. And what's interesting is that he did not even add his usual asterisk that it is in recalculated purchasing ability parity index. Don't even go there. This is some artificial fake book type index that was invented by Putin's economist that basically says 1 ruble equals roughly $20. Well, show me where I can buy an iPhone for these recalculated numbers, and then I may start believing it. But he didn't even make a reference to that index. He was just said, yeah, we're the first in Europe, no matter Britain, France, Germany, who are much bigger than Russia economically. So while Putin brings completely detached statements from life, everybody else with a frightening frankness, we're talking about how everything is seriously bad in reality. This is an interview with Gref, head of Sberbank. We are seeing significant issues with the economy. We're basically seeing the disruption of the main investment cycle. We are the biggest bank financing investment projects in Russia. We have about 60 to 70% of this market. And for the first time since the beginning of this year, and we're already in the middle of it, we have not funded any new single projects. We're just finishing the investments into the old existing projects. that tells us basically that for the last 28 months that the high rates are prevailing, they're killing the economy. You're not funding these projects because you do not get new requests, or you're seeing more risks than usual? Well, actually both. But in practice, the flow of asking for new money, the demand for new money is almost gone, basically gone. The behavior of business changed. When the economy is overheated, it's difficult, but when it's overly cooled down, this is horrible. And another snippet from his breakfast at this forum. Today we see there is a correlation between the amount of free money available to the companies for investment and the volume of percent payments that they have to pay for borrowed money is reaching the crisis, is reaching the critical threshold. Beyond that, we may find ourselves in a very serious crisis. And it is difficult not only to companies, but also to those who are operating this economy, the operators of a higher level. Today, for example, we see that the companies who have issues with money, they also birth difficulties for the companies who haven't had these difficulties before. So, going back to summarizing these discussions, the whole overall mood of them was significantly grim. And it was also underlined by the clip of Sberbank, artificial intelligence generated video clip that Sberbank has created. They are fans of AI and they've been doing quite a bit of visuals for these forums. And check out what they have produced this time. Even their AI has already figured things out. The clip is pretty creepy. And it's basically saying that 3 years after beginning the full-scale invasion into Ukraine, everything is crystal clear that Russia is not really pulling it through, and the situation is cracking apart under the weight of everything. And here's the clip. But the country is facing new challenges. On the backdrop of huge inflation, Bank of Russia went to the record high refinancing rate, 20%, which is making it difficult for businesses to survive. The constraints of the labor market is another constraint. Financial state of the companies is dwindling. Investment plans are being delayed. Growth is being stunned. More risks and concerns about non-payments and recession are entering our parlance. Yet we still face the tasks of technological transformation, sharply as ever. How do we avoid systemic recession? How do we develop under pressure? What can drive our new growth? These topics will be discussed at the annual breakfast of Sberbank today. So this was the point of view of the artificial intelligence clip generated by the Sberbank. And let's also look at some of the quotes of the participants of this conversation. You probably will agree that this is anything but description of some nice, well-developing economy that has no effect in it from any sanctions, that sees a good path forward. More likely, this is a description of the economy of a third world country that is in a very deep crisis. Yes, indeed, we are in a state of controlled cool-down of economy, attempting to go back to the potential that we have, to way to realize it. This is painful for today. Our main issues are with crediting, as you saw, and with votes here of everybody present and TV viewers as well. Huge refinance rate does not allow us to continue. Development of high technology production needs better margins. Only ecosystem altogether can help us solve it. Just big corporations cannot provide for the coherent growth of the overall high technology development. They need smaller and medium-sized businesses to support that effort. And those companies are significantly suffering with high bank rates, and we need to solve this task as soon as possible. So, when we hear the thesis coming from the main economists, we believe, I'd rather hear them saying that we see. because right now we're seeing the lowering of all indexes. We see complete disconnect between the current inflation rate, the huge rate of growth that we actually observing, and we're also, the scariest part, what we're seeing is that extensive capabilities and reserves that we had, that we could use to grow our economy, they're basically done with. Everywhere where we could step into the places of the foreign companies that left, all these niches are already taken. And for new investments, for new projects, we need long investments. We need serious planning horizon investments. And here I think we'll need to talk again about institutes. That's what German Gref also mentioned, because without institutes, without protection of rights of the investors, we cannot talk about any long-term investments under any bank rate. Another interview of the attendees, it means that the real rate change difference between the real inflation and official inflation is huge. It's at least 15%. And with such a big difference, of course, all investors, all people with capital, they choose deposits instead of investing. You don't need to go to the market, figure out difficult instruments and ways to work with them effectively. You just put your money onto deposit. There is a ruble that is fortifying, and if it continues, you can get 20%. And there is no other industry that can offer you that profitability. So in these conditions, there are no motives and stimuli for investors to develop new production, to develop manufacturing. There are just none. There are no financial stimuli. And of course, if the level of rate will continue to remain high for an extended period, then the number of restructurizations that we'll see among the companies leading to defaults will be increasing. This is as if you inhale and take a big breath of air before you dive. If you need to stay underwater for 10 or 20 seconds, not a big issue. We've seen that before. We had a growth rate and then it goes down drastically to bring back everything. But now we've been underwater for a long time. And imagine you're underwater for 30 seconds, for a minute and a half. So however much air you inhaled before you went down, you still want to breathe a lot. So you're saying that the oxygen reserves of business are where? You know, whatever number I give you now, I will be wrong. But I sincerely hope that we will have a chance soon to take a breath of fresh air when the rate will go down. Another forum. Speaking of the overall Russian machine manufacturing, we joined our ranks. We figured that we can produce a lot of things at the home market, but this year our atlas has really shrunk because the high bank rate is really pressing on us. Oh, not just you guys with the manufacturing. Yeah, I'm sure that each of you sitting at this table can say a lot about this high rate. We're all pretty diplomatic, but describing it, I want to say that the atlas has indeed shrunk. We need to do a lot to make sure his back doesn't break. So pay attention, dear viewers, that there were a lot of things mentioned on this forum, that big industries in Russia are going into a deep decline. Coal industry is facing a significant crisis, actually one of the harshest, and coal regions cannot even get out of the economic pitfall. We talked about that in our other videos about regional economies, and there'll be another one coming soon. Metallurgy is also in a significant decline. The head of Severstal, Shevelov, was making headlines at this forum with his words that because of the issues they're facing, they will have to start stopping metallurgic factories. And this is reality. These are the things that you don't do because it's nearly impossible to restart it again without refitting the production. But he's talking about shrinking the production by 30% because there is no demand for what they're making. And before the forum, the head of fishing industry German Zverev also gave an industry saying that the industry is stormy. And also leaders of agriculture came out and said that everything is so bad that we don't even want to talk about it. They actually, the topic of agriculture was moved to the shadows. There were no official statements or anything planned for agriculture bloc. Because agriculture is already in deepest crisis. We've been talking about that in our reviews with Michael Naki and my videos about regions. I might make another video about agriculture later this month, but the crises are marching in any segment that you take. Small business in Russia is just collapsing under the weight of all these economic problems. As the head of Pillar of Russia Association, Kalinin, said that whatever small business is meeting today in Russia can be described eloquently with the phrase Valley of Death. Here's a snippet of an interview with him. We see that in the first quarter, we experienced demand shrinking for steel by 13%. The construction is dwindling by 14%. How significant this fall is for your company? I think this is serious not only for our company, it is serious for the industry at large. Indeed, the construction that is forming about 75% of demand for our product, when it falls down by 14, that's a significant factor. Overall, the prognosis for this year is pessimistic because the dynamic we're seeing in the last 4 or 5 months, we can project that the demand for steel will go down this year by at least 10%. And the ruble rate is a significant factor. We are seeing that the exchange rate for ruble is artificially inflated, and what it leads to is that the export-oriented industries like metallurgy cannot export our product because this is not economically profitable. High ruble rate is stifling our ability to make money. And we also do not have access to European markets and due to sanctions to many other usual markets. So we have to transport our steel to unusual faraway places, and strong ruble just doesn't allow us to cover the transportation or intermittent changes for most of metallurgy companies. That's why we cannot rule out stopping of certain factories on our country, because that would be needed to balance the supply. Another interview with Ekaterina Lobacheva, president of X5 Group. We are seeing the cool down of economy. We have seen for the first time shrinkage of economy sector in food segment. We can see the inflation affecting things, and basically this is affecting growth. We look at what is specifically interesting for me. Do we actually experience the fall of food production in our country? It actually exists. It started. It is correlated with inflation. There is a small growth that is within the inflation parameters, but there is no real growth. So raw materials are also experiencing the pressure. Our key export goods are metal and gas and oil, and we're facing the decline of about 10% in these exports. Coal industry is facing 27% decline, and compared with more difficult logistics because of the sanctions, it creates significant issues for our basic industries. What else is happening now? We can look at the railroad, and this is one of the railroad representatives speaking at the forum. Due to the situation in the world and the way they are being charged and the economic situation in the world, we can see that there is a significant decline in transportation demand. For Russian railroads, we're seeing 23% on various goods, 18% on oil, and this is a significant decline. Also, we do face a significant shrinkage of available cargo capacity, and it is related to limits of impose limits on us by the various railroad segments that we're trying to use more, and also some of the wagons are getting old. Yeah, another interview. I'm seeing that the market is really cooled down. The effect of this, the real effect of this, will be 2 to 3 years down the road. We are solving the inflation right now, but we are deferring a bigger problem by 2 to 3 years. What does it mean? It means that people will not be able to buy apartments, to buy homes. Small business has a credit line of 13 trillion rubles right now. That has never been before. This is a huge number. A small business is servicing most of this debt. German was already saying that up to 70% of the floating rate. In the last 2.5 years, half of the small businesses have closed. The valley of death is a good descriptor to what we're seeing. On the automobile market, 60 to 70% of Russian vehicles were always sold on credit terms. It's usual practice. It's easier for people to buy up to 60% of their vehicles on credit. With the current exchange rate, they're not going to do that. No bigger purchases. I don't know, TV, refrigerator, vehicle. People are not taking credit. Meantime, the returns on deposits are pretty high, so why would I take credit for something? I can maybe buy a vehicle next year. This year I'll put this money on the deposit and let just money grow and make some money there. That's why AvtoVAZ, Russian automobile manufacturer, is seeing decline of 30% demand this year. And by the way, they are most successful among the manufacturers in Russia in vehicles. So the others are facing more declines. Oh yeah, we're also concerned by Chinese refreshing their models. If we understand, Germans usually refresh their model lines every 3 years. Chinese are changing their lines every year, and it's not just restyling or facelift. That's significant engineering changes that they're implementing. And of course, we are working with all business segments, with small and large, and the current exchange rates significantly affect the demand. I apologize, I came a bit late to this roundtable. I was in traffic jam at the entry to this forum, and I did not see a single Russian vehicle at the entrance. Oh, we came here on ours. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not rich enough to afford this vehicle. Well, no, I'm not talking about myself, but in general. Yeah, still haven't seen anyone. I would rather see a lot more Moskvich and Lada Russian-produced vehicles in this forum to be used by participants, but today I've seen none. So there is another problem that was talked a lot, the cadre deficit. And almost everybody who had a mic was referring to this problem, how significant and sharp it is. I did not even include that into the economic review with Michael Naki, because I think you can understand that situation is dire, and not even every other speaker, but every speaker mentioned that cadre situation is trashy, and they do not see a way out. Nabiulina commenting that companies are seeing a crisis with workforce. Gref highlighting that the inadequacy and high prices, high costs of new labor are significant issues on the Russian market. And what is seriously being missed is a qualified workforce for specific qualifications, and also the question of how to not only find them, but how to offer them something competitive in terms of salaries. So we're missing qualified managers, qualified engineers, qualified technicians. German Gref, in one of his statements today, outlined that cadre and labor resources are significant issues for our economy today, and we cannot change anything here without changing bigger economic motors. Another speaker also highlighting the deficit in cadres. Today, small business employs about 40% of people in Russia, of those who actually work. And what we are seeing is that we, significantly lack human resources on the market, and without migrants, we probably cannot get by. There is a new law in our Duma suggesting to organize specific groups of employees from nearby countries and to try to make it unnecessary for them to take the exam in Russian language, which used to be mandatory. Here's an example. I brought some Vietnamese construction workers to Sakhalin, and they failed to pass Russian test. Who wins from that? We already have to pay double for a usual mason worker on Sakhalin, and now we have to deport this labor back because they didn't pass the Russian exam. So if we don't find a way to fight this situation, we'll not be able to conquer some elements of this inflation. So what do you want? After Putin's war, mass mobilization, mass outflow of specialists from Russia to neighboring countries and far beyond, of course, their labor market is going to suffer. I don't know where these military analysts are finding 30,000 contractors that they're talking about supposedly on paper that Russia gathers monthly. We talked about that in details in one of the recent videos, that they're nowhere near that number, that there is nobody to continue fighting. And one of the sharp discussions on this forum is that all the representatives of bureaucracy and business, they're basically demanding to stop requesting migrants to learn Russian language. Because with this regulation, with this rule, they just cannot bring anyone to work, even on construction, even on more simple tasks. And there is another review that was published by Central Bank Monitoring of Companies as of June 2025. They highlight that cadre and human resources at the lowest supply this year that has never been at this low before in the recent history. Russian Forbes is also writing about that cadre issue is still the sharpest one for Russian companies, and it's not looking to disappear anytime soon. And another consequence of Putin's war, that the head of X5 retail group, Ekaterina Lobacheva, was saying that the fact is that the numbers of labor-capable workers in Russia are falling. And this is not surprising at the backdrop of the losses that Putin is suffering with his army in Ukraine. How many Russians are dying, how many Russians fled the country related to this war and his policies. And the head of X5 Retail Group is talking about the consequences of this. Here is the interview. So what is the situation with the employees in your industry, in retail? Oh, we are seeing a deficit, and it's growing. By 28, we are prognosticating to not have up to 500,000 people, to miss 500,000 people in retail. You notice that we already suffering from the dwindling labor market, that work-capable people our numbers are horrible in Russia. And what we're telling here about in this stream is that in Putin's corrupt, monopolized oligarchic system, when Russia is cut off from the civilized world, from technologies, from international cooperation, no import replacement can carry it out. And Gref is talking about the problems with components for Russian aviation, that very often they end up being times more expensive than foreign analogs. And Russian jets turn out to be heavier, and because of that, they can fly on shorter distances with smaller number of passengers. Overall, their performance is puny. And I forgot the name of this minister, Minister of the Arctic and Far East, I think, Minister Chikonkov, right? We quote him sometimes, and he was presenting at the session of the gas supplies to the East, and he acknowledged that I was visiting different gas pipes and places where we mine all these materials in Komi Republic and such, and I'm horrified by how nothing works because we're not pumping gas to Europe anymore. Here are more speeches from a forum. German Gref is saying that the production of jets in Russia can cost up to 7 times more than same equivalent that can be manufactured by Western competitors. And what's another significant is that our jets are 2.5 times heavier than the Western jets. That's why it cannot fly as far. And here's the Minister of Resources. Yeah, we're facing an issue that the gas that we're pumping to Europe before, all these facilities that were engaged, it really is saddening when you walk in the mining areas along the pipes where 500 million cubic meters were shipped every day, every 24 hours along these pipes. Now they're standing empty. And we're facing huge matters of how do we convert that? How can we use it? And there are significant regions where there's nothing else but these industries. I was impressed by the number of 175 billion cubic meters that used to be flown in the Ukhta pipes, and now it's almost nothing. Speaking of import replacement, an interesting note that was pronounced by the head of Gazprom Oil, Dukov, he is one of the Putin oligarchs. He said that our country is very crafty. We can make an exclusive restaurant, but we are always going to fail to build a well-functioning network of restaurants, chain network of restaurants. And this is an important story because it outlines that we do have talent in the country, but we are lacking effective system that could organize people and create working systems in different segments of economy. Putin failed to create systemic aspect, that all successes are driven in by individuals, and his economy is based on his friends who are getting big slices of it. And here's Alexander Dukov talking about that. Yeah, we can create manufacturing, we can create new technologies if we want to, but when we have to serialize it, that's where we fail, because we are a crafty country. We can open exclusive restaurants, we can set up some exclusive project, but we will usually fail to standardize, to create a chain, to serialize products. And the main idea on this forum was that there is no exit. There is no easy exit from this situation. So a big elephant in the room is that you need to stop the war. You need to restore your relations with a civilized world. You need to dismantle Putin's oligarchic, monopolistic, non-transparent system that is not reporting anything to society, not responsible to society. But this is not acceptable for forums. But here a few things were still spilling over. And central bank was the usual culprit to blame on this forum because of the high rates. But we're not going to support central bank in this decision, but it's a significant symptom that a high rate is basically an indicator that Russian economy is in a difficult place because it was cut off from the world, and all the money that are being invested are going in the pockets. They're not going into development. There's no international cooperation. There is no access to the world financial market and cheap money. The markets of China, India, and other countries of the global south remain closed. Everything is being stolen by Putin's corrupt monopolies. Under these conditions, manufacturing cannot develop. Any influx of money into the economy will end up just increasing prices. And those who are waiting the exchange rate to go down as some panacea, on one hand, the vice president of VTB, Pianov, is saying that one needs a significantly long signal to bring the rate down, to change something. It's not enough to bring the rate down from 20 to 18%. But at the same time, don't expect 10%. Nobody's talking about that. And in the current dead-end situation, when we have limited resources, we cannot produce more resources. We cannot produce more supply. Putin's economy is just not a producing economy. Even if you increase or change the exchange rate or refinance rate, it'll lead only to fluctuations in pricing, because Russia failed to learn how to serialize production, how to produce more, how to make more goods in the country on its own. So all that hope that central bank might eventually bring the exchange rate, the refinance rate down, nothing is going to happen in the near future. This is just some hope that they're trying to grasp on, but this is an indicator. This is not the disease. So here's another snippet from an interview. Our rate went down, yeah, by 1%. So you think that that can affect the economy somewhat on the exchange rate of ruble? No. In my view, this is too minor. 1% from 21 to 20%, that's nothing. For the economy, even that drop could have helped if there was a significant signal that this is a new vector. But since the signal was that future decisions are undefined and everything can go either way and depends on inflation and other factors, that doesn't inspire for businesses, for banks, for manufacturers, that they can project what to do just because of this 1%. Another piece of this forum, we are seeing the trend to the inflation slowdown, but we need more time to verify that this is indeed a strong vector. And we can say that the prices do not grow high if economy is in good potential, is in good place. Yet the prices last year were growing very significantly, and that indicates that those resources that allow us to grow our economy, they're significantly limited. And that's why in this situation, even if you drop the refinance rate, it will not change anything but the prices, probably. And here is one of the main problems we're coming to. Here coming to that Andrei Makarov that impressed Ksenia Sobchak, and she had flashbacks from the Nude party, for which she was slapped by a lot of media and society for participating. So what Makarov was saying is that investments are the keystone of economy, that the private business needs to be comfortable to bring the money to invest in the economy, because government never has enough money to do that. Successful countries that achieved any growth of economy, they all figured a way to invest more investors. Here is the chart. Europe, United States, EU, countries of BRICS, China, BRICS without China and Brazil, Canada, and Russia is the last one in that list. This is in the number of investment money. Russia is at the bottom of this table. And in more than three years of full-scale aggression against Ukraine, Russia lost 300 billion money worth of foreign investments. These are the money that fled from Russia. Even China diminished their investments into Russia during this war, because Russia is not attractive. There are huge risks. No laws are correctly functioning. There is no way to easily defend your rights in court. Even for Chinese investors, it's difficult for them to fight for their rights. They have to get special permissions from the government to take money out of Russia after making money in Russia. They have to put them on some specific account, wait for permission that government commission needs to give them. So why would Chinese want to invest money in Russia with all these strings attached? So investment money is fleeing, and you cannot change that with change of bank rate. If the capitals and companies do not see friendly atmosphere, they run. And this was the topic of Andrei Makarov's speech on this forum. So about the next year, how do we survive to the next breakfast at this economic forum? Mr. Makarov. Okay, yeah, let me not say what I think, because I do want to live to the next breakfast. But one business is not talking about investment climate as the main problem and the lack of institutes. That's a big issue. Institutes give you a chance to go to a court system if something was violated. You can go to court then and expect to have just decision regardless of whom you're arguing with. This is the right of ownership defense that is provided by these institutions, that is not warranted by your relations to the government. I'm not meaning any specific person in government, but as a system. This is just respect to ownership, to the right of ownership. We're lacking that. Recently we learned, finally, thank God, now it's clear that I always wanted to have some clear on that. We figured that the terms of crime or terms of problem, they start the countdown not from the event happening, but from the time when district attorneys, the prosecutor's office, has learned about it. And not just when they learned about it, but from the time when they did not like it. So now we know how it works. And that's why perhaps businesses stopped talking about investment climate. And as they said, you bring up very serious economic questions here, but recently questioning economic mechanisms and economic issues very often ends up in people looking for, I don't want to say enemies of the people, but enemies. As if there are some enemies hiding somewhere that want to harm business, harm the economy, harm the country. Mostly it is related to very nearsightedness of those who are looking for these answers, who cannot offer anything but printing more money and want to ascribe all these problems to the presence of some imaginary enemies. And without reference to our too far away past, I want to say that we have passed through all these things before, and I hope we do remember how it ended up last time. Excuse me, I need to interrupt you here. German Gref comes up. What, do I need to stop? Oh no, please continue. Why do you have such an expression on your face as if they already came for me and I'll be escorted out right now? Yeah, so there is almost a confrontation happening, that Gref couldn't take it anymore and had to jump and intervene, that there'll be a police coming to this session and arresting everybody. But this is an interesting moment. This is the thing we are talking with you about here, about the finality of Putin's resources, about them being depleted. Very often people accuse us of being too pessimistic, that Putin will be able to fight this war forever, and he has enough resources. Here, official people of his system acknowledging it openly that they're out of resources. And what's interesting, Andrei Makarov is drawing the same parallel here that we usually draw in our streams, parallels with the end of Soviet Union. That Soviet system was built with the assumption that they will always have resources, that the resources will be forever. But there was no private business to generate resources, to create added value. And at the end, they just ate through all the resources they had, and the socialist system of Russia crashed, of Soviet Union crashed. Continuation of his speech. This is called the main economic law of socialism. Maximal satisfaction of growing demands of labor force. And I want to upset you and everybody in the room that the demands of labor force will continue to be growing, will continue to grow. And the government does not have money to satisfy continuously growing demand. Socialism collapsed only because it could not fulfill its main economic law. And we here have not even started writing our main economic laws. Thank you. You can see how actual the parallels with Soviet Union are today, and that is pushing me to start a new media cycle, a new cycle of streams between the Putin's regime and the end of Soviet regime in the USSR. We'll talk about that in other streams. We made a couple of videos last year. How will Putinism be over with? And there are a lot of similarities that can be drawn between that and the crash of Soviet Empire. But explosive budgetary deficit, that was one of the significant factors that sunk the USSR. Here, Minister of Finance Anton Silanov actually talked to that topic. I think for the first time. He's usually rather diplomatic. Yes, we will figure it out. don't worry, everything is under control. Here he was very blunt. He said the budget is stormy and everybody will have to be more modest in their wishes and to measure their appetites. So Anton, with this vector, by the end of this year, we'll go looking for new ways to fund our demand somewhere in the budget. Do you think the budget will increase the taxation of business to get more money? Well, German, with these conditions, indeed, everything is stormy, not only in the economy in general, but in our sector too. How can we provide financial stability? We can try being more modest in our aspirations in these conditions, that's for sure. So look, this is a very pinnacle moment here, where we are right now. Here, almost live, we can observe the sunset of an empire, another Russian empire sunsetting, about which the representatives are not even hiding their thoughts. I like this forum. The main summary of this forum is that there is no exit. They do not have recipes to somehow move forward. They're like fools, keep running around with an idea that central bank will be lowering the percent rate, Matnabiulina, and we showed that in a previous video that, look, 2 years ago, the rate was 7.5%, much lower. And what, your manufacturing of locomotives started better? No, this is not the case. It's obvious. And they're just a collection of intellectual dwarfs. They do not have ideas to move the country forward. And the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking and speeding up. This is exactly what was at the end of Soviet Union. Andrei Makarov addressed that as well. Why did the country collapse? Because everybody thought that Soviet Union will have endless resources to support this ineffective system. And resources started to run out. Back then, everybody started running like cockroaches and discussing the program of reforms. They did not make a decision right on time, and it ended up leading to the country collapse. There is no alternative to the market. And exactly that is being voiced again now in Petersburg Economic Forum. And also the most corrupt elements, archaic elements of Putin's system, they're still resisting. They're still trying to pretend that everything is fine, even though it's more and more difficult for them to pull it through. And yet still they spill a little bit about their model and their ideals that they want to build. On this breakfast of Sberbank, where Gref and Makarov and the others had a pretty sharp conversation about these, there was one Putin's bureaucrat, Kirill Dmitriev. He's a husband of Putin's friend. And you might have heard about him for participating in some negotiations with Trump. So he is part of the Putin's family. He doesn't want to change anything. He's a horrible, disgusting dude. And if you listen to his speech, he's also dumb. He's talking about some stupidities, and one of the things that he mentioned, de facto acknowledging what is the ideal of Putin's system, it would be so great if, like in the Middle East, because we had monarchies. Monarchy is the speed of making decisions. You don't need through all the democratic procedures. You just agreed with the king or prince, and that's it. You shook hands and everything is done. And that's the ideal model that Putin's gang aspires to build in Russia. I would remind our viewers that Middle East monarchies are some of the worst kingdoms. Just look at the world rating of freedoms. People do not have rights. People have no elections. As properly objected on this forum by an absolutely loyal Putinist and FSB functionary in the pharmaceutical industry, Alexei Repik, who was also making a statement in this forum. He said that I want to argue a little here, that Saudi Arabia is okay, but it's a very low baseline for us, because just a few years ago that they allowed their women to drive cars. Before that, it was forbidden. So even Putin's loyal representatives, they're saying that this is too much. Saudi Arabia is not a good comparison for us. And they all, as we saw in this forum, they wanted more freedom. That Putin and his gang wanted to be like Saudi Arabia, with limited rules, and those who do not agree with you can chop their heads off. But even their close bureaucrats are already saying that, no, we actually do want more rights. We don't want it to be like Saudi Arabia. Here's that Putin's goon. Monarchy is a very functional system that allows to make decisions faster, and it also can draw a lot of talented people from other countries to work there. Well, no, here's an opponent saying that long live our friends from Saudi Arabia, but it's ill-advised to compare us to Saudi Arabia, where they just in 2013 allowed women to drive cars. So this actually looks like a continuous progress there, and we're perhaps a little more spoiled. We want to be compared not with Saudi Arabia, but with some other countries. This whole arguing is quite interesting to watch. We had an interesting discussion with Maxim Reznik. He was a guest of our channel, where we talked about why Putinists always start looking for references in history, and they try to convert that in a perverted way that supports their ideas. Same thing here. They want to be monarchs. They, of course, have a lot of things in common with that later Russian monarchy, Russian Empire, the end of 19th, beginning of 20th century, where the whole idea was basically about keeping monarchy for the sake of monarchy, so that the upper-level rulers could do whatever they want with the country and not lose the power and not share it. And that's what led to the crash and catastrophe. There is another set of videos on my channel about that. And they are behaving in the same vector. They essentially already expressing, that's what Dmitriev acknowledged in Petersburg Forum, they want to rule Russia like Saudi Arabia, the country that is named by the name of the family that organized that, by the Al Saud's family. So I don't know if they'll rename Russia into Putinland, but what we can see from this forum is that they are at a standstill, at the dead end of the economic road. And as German Gref in his finishing remarks on this forum is stating, all rivers are leading us in a wrong direction that we wanted to. If we will float down these rivers that are floating here, it's sadly that all the rivers here are floating to a wrong point where we all want to find ourselves in. Yes, dear Gera, this all leads to a very wrong place, not where you want to, because history cannot be turned and reversed. You tried to, but you ended in a very significant storm and a very bad dead end that you are acknowledging now. I really loved this forum. I've warned you a lot. We talked about these things on our channel and other streams where I make statements and prognostications. I was saying for a while that you'll soon hear from Russian officials the acknowledgement of what we already know, that Russian system does not work and sinks deeper and deeper into the crisis of huge proportions. And now we are seeing that live. The sunset of Putin's empire. Of course, the clock is still ticking and they have a little bit of time. Again, everybody's waiting that the crash may come tomorrow. No, it won't come tomorrow. But before each 1917, they had 1915, 1916, when from pretty high pulpits all the projections were said. Like Pavel Milyukov said, this is the stupidity or treason back in Tsarist Russia in 1916. Or what in 1989 the Congress and People's Deputies were saying, including Dmitry Sakharov, who were acknowledging the processes happening in the Soviet Union. So the moment we start hearing these things in the upper echelons of power, that are good indicators that the empire is going into a sunset. And we can see in this economic forum that they have no ideas how to pull it. Everything they have, like Andrei Makarov said, is to print more money, to lower the bank rate, refinance rate, and that can somehow keep them afloat for a little longer. But there is no way for that to replace manufacturing. This is only the road to hyperinflation, by an example of many other countries. They're out of ideas, things don't work, the empire is sunsetting, and as German Gref acknowledged, all these rivers are taking us in a wrong direction. Good formulation. This was Vladimir Milov, and we're continuing to observe the end of that story. But this Petersburg Economic Forum that happened in June was a very good element and statement of the current state of affairs.